Hey everybody, I don't know why I give you the date. It's something I started doing. I'm not sure why, Jesse. But it's June 27th, in case you were wondering. It's just after 2 o'clock, and I'm super excited about this episode. And Jesse, it's good to see you as always. We've got Mr. William Tutt in the house. I just met this man last week, and we've done the last few weeks having different people throughout law enforcement on the show, but I wanted to get someone from the community to come in and talk to us as well. And I think it's equally important. And so when I met Tutt through Doug Green, a good friend of mine, we went and had breakfast, and I was like, man, there's such huge opportunity here with this individual and what we could do together and what he can do for law enforcement throughout the country. And so I just knew I had to have him on this show. Everyone, please welcome Mr. William Tutt to the show. He is a cognitive behavioral consultant with an incredible story. And as I put in the show notes, while he has an incredibly powerful story, I'm actually really, really more impressed with his mission and his willingness to have conversations and to come out. And I actually invited him out to the police academy last week to have him come and speak to the cadets. And it was such a great experience. And so anyway, I just happy that he's here. We're going to get right into this. I appreciate you being here, Tutt. I'm super excited about listening to more of what you have to say and for sharing what you've told me with our audience and getting the message out there. So thank you for being here.
Joe, thank you for inviting me. I really, really appreciate it. It is very important, at this time that law enforcement and the public engage in conversations that are, number one, healthy, and number two, that are beneficial for both parties. I would like to share a little bit of my past at this present time, if I can.
Absolutely.
At the age of 13 in 1983, I was in Los Angeles, California, and I got quoted into the Crip gang. So at the age of 13, I started representing non-mafia Crip. And that was in 1983. 6 years later, at the age of 19, I was charged with aggravated kidnapping, attempted capital murder of a police officer, evading arrest, and I had 9 robbery cases pending. I ended up doing 13 years in prison. While I was in prison, I began to study psychology through my colleague and who was also my mentor, Dr. Al Cook, who was over the head of the psychology department at Texas Valley Community College. And he is a very inspirational person to me. He saw me one time in prison, and he stopped me and he asked me, said, "Aren't you the leader of the Crips?" And I said, "Man, you better get out of my face with that. Who are you to be questioning me?" He said, "Well, can I ask you a question in private?" I said, "No, you can ask me a question in front of these individuals that are here with me," which was my security detail at that time in prison. And he said, "Are you going to continue to lead your people to destruction?" I stood back and I said, "What?" He said, "They listen to you. You send them on missions." So I went back to my holding cell and I was playing chess with a guy who we would call a lifetime convict. He had been locked up 20 years already. So he had a lot of knowledge and wisdom about himself. And he had said, "That's Dr. Al Cook. You should go ahead and take one of his sociology and psychology classes." And I said, "Man, I'm not going to let somebody play mind games with me." It stood on my mind for a few days. So 2 weeks later, I went and signed up for his sociology class. And the rest is history. I took every single psychology class that could be offered while I was in prison. And I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in psychology. And now I have over 20 years of experience in dealing with gang members, at-risk youth, and the prison population. I published a manuscript titled Urban Psychotherapy, Understanding the Hood Mentality and the Urban Identity Theory. It's a professional guideline for individuals to understand the results that poverty has on its inhabitants. Many individuals, African American and Hispanic people, we suffer from mental disorders that go undiagnosed over a long period of time because we don't go to the psych, we can't afford the psych, and going to the psychiatrist just isn't a part of our environment, what the environment dictates to us. My program has 2 components in it. One component is called GRIP, which is gang rehabilitation rehabilitation and progress. And in this program, I counsel to gang members so they can better understand themselves and their situation and why they make the decisions that they make. Have you ever wondered why individuals join a gang? Why do they stay in gangs knowing that the result is death or prison? Because logic thought doesn't set in. We suffer from cognitive processing errors, and we become a part of a negative behavior cycle. And just like anyone can be part of a negative behavior cycle, so can law enforcement. And that's the second part of the program, urban psychotherapy, law enforcement training.
Wow, that's actually incredible, Mr. Tutt. So I'll just say, like, since Joe met you, he hasn't stopped talking about you, right? He like, you really knocked his socks off. He really believes in what you're saying, and I think we'll get into a little bit of that. So, like Joe mentioned, right, we've been kind of, ever since things happened, we've kind of been looking at everything all around, right? We talked about it ourselves, Joe and I. We had, law enforcement officers who are Black. We talked to law enforcement leadership, kind of different perspectives. And now we're bringing in the community, and someone in the community is doing really positive things. So what we've started every time with has been this just question is, in your own words, what's happening in America right now? Not an incident specific or a case related, just overall, what's happening in your own words, what's happening right now?
I truly believe that what's happening in this country right now is an eye-opening change, okay? I'm gonna have to go back just a little bit, and then I'm gonna come all the way up to this point about what's happening in the country now, right? So if you look at a unjustifiable lynching in 1865, and then you look at an unjustifiable lynching in 2000, you're gonna see that the results are gonna be the same. The officer's not gonna receive any punishment, any prosecution, the investigation may not even take place. And this is because we're upholding what's called a preconditioned belief system. In the 1800s, and I want people to really have an open mind about what I'm about to say and discuss, please. In the 1800s, there was a nigger hunting license issued to individuals, and their job was to hunt niggers. And y'all excuse me for using that word, but it's actually on the license, to hunt niggers and to kill them and to document, if they had any markings, scars, their height, so that when you got back to town, that person can be taken off your population count, so to speak. Later in life, this group became sanctioned and known as the sheriffs, which is an Arabic word meaning sharif, which is supposed to be to protect those in the community. But the sheriffs was formed only to protect white people and to serve white people and to hunt niggers. And that's what the gist of it was. And we have to understand that through epigenetic transference, meaning that here's your DNA, your 32 chromosomes, through different episodes that happen in traumatic experiences in someone's life, you have genomes that are attached to your DNA. Now, the stress of slavery is attached to white DNA, just as attached to Black DNA. And pose the question is this to officers: why do Black people run? Why do white officers chase and kill? It goes back to our DNA. Soon as a Black person sees an officer, we run because we have been running since the 1800s. You've been chasing because you've been chasing since the 1800s. And nobody wants to talk about these things and put it in the forefront because a lot of people want to really believe that I'm not racist. I have Black friends. I socialize with Black people. But then we have to look at the behavior overall in its totality. And you'll see that justice is one-sided. The laws that are created are one-sided. So we have to look at this country as being a country that was built on racism and applying this preconditioned belief. Now, what's happening in this country now has been happening for years. Now we're able to see the murders on TV. We're able to see it through the body cams, through the videos and people's cell phones and whatnot. But then when you take this to a jury and you say, we just imagine me doing a police officer killing and shooting and taking the officer's badge and clothes off and show that video. People go, oh, that's murder. Oh my God. But once you put the badge and the clothes back on, they say, oh, it's justifiable. Now, let me show you something about a preconditioned belief. When someone swings at you, you do like this automatically. Your brain and your body tells the muscles to protect themselves. But there were laws created to call this resisting arrest. When you come and approach me and I know your intentions aren't good, Mr. Officer, I run because of my DNA. But you created a law calling that evading arrest. And you see where I'm going with that? So I think that right now in this country, not only the African Americans and the Hispanics are fed up, but I'm seeing a lot of, Caucasian people that are just saying, you know what, enough is enough. And I think that's what's happening in the country right now.
Thanks for that. And like you mentioned, the only way that we're going to be able to get through this is by having candid conversations. So I appreciate it. But this brings me to another thought, right? And so I have this idea right now. And Joe, if you want to bring up this image, please. There's something that's called procedural justice. And it states that people don't follow law because of their fear of punishment necessarily. They really respond to legitimacy. And that's to say, if people don't perceive the police or government as legitimate, they won't follow it or even acknowledge it sometimes. It doesn't matter what the truth is or what they say. If there's stats, whatever, they won't look at it. Perception becomes reality. And like you've even brought another point where it's like ingrained in our genetics possibly, right? And then all these psychosocial things. And there's some things I want to get to, but first I want to talk about this and then we'll get to the next question. But if we look here, right, people aren't going to follow the law unless they perceive the police as fair, right? If we look at perceived risk of sanction, like that's not effective. If we're saying if you do this, you're going to go to jail, that's not why people follow the law. It's because of legitimacy, how they view legitimacy and how they view fairness. So those have strong effects towards willingness to cooperate and not break the law. And I think we've broken both of these, right? Throughout many communities all around. Some people just have this view across the nation. Police aren't fair and they're not a legitimate authority. And I think that's where we're at right now. But the other part that was there is morality. So interpersonal morality is a huge influence on willingness to obey the law or not. And before I get to that, I want to say that people are viewing us as violent killers, that we're hunting blacks. And, it's interesting how I'll speak to people and they'll admit that when they were pulled over by the police, they were terrified, right? And it's just a simple traffic stop for the officer, right? You didn't stop at a red light or, your tail light was out and they're just making a general traffic stop. But the person behind the wheel is in fear for their life. How do we fix that? How do we fix the perception of this? And I don't know, can we? You just mentioned it's ingrained in our DNA. What can we do?
The first thing that we have to do, at the law enforcement, first of all, has to acceptance, meaning that you have to acknowledge that there is a problem. If law enforcement throughout this country thinks that when you shoot a black man in the back, when we constantly over 1,200, in the last 5 years, that's a lot. You understand? And on that, out of that 1,202 prosecutions, that's very unfair. So we have to admit that there's a problem, first of all, that your behavior is not acceptable in the force. See, this behavior is acceptable in the force. So by it being acceptable in the force, it doesn't matter what the public says. And then we have to talk about qualified immunity. That's the officer's insurance policy. That's that old school license that I'm telling you about, license to kill. See, James Bond took that and made a movie about it and a little cliche, but this is a true thing, a living piece of document having a sanctioned license to kill. Now, if we have qualified immunity, then I will pull my gun out and continue to shoot African Americans in the back because I know that I have that insurance policy over my head. I know that I'm going to get suspended with pay. I know that the police force union has my back. Now, during the shooting, all this is not playing off in your mind, of course. It's in the subconscious mind, which causes your reactive behavior. You understand that? Memory, reactive behavior, stimuli causing the action. So we look at how can an 18-year-old be racist today with all of this stuff going on and around? Because it's in his DNA. It takes one word, one stimuli to activate this. Because if you can see that right after our president won, how many racial disparities and things came about in the public and in the social media. So that's the first step, acknowledging that there is a problem. I have a video that's very disturbing. It's recent, and it's going to be a part of my teachings now. You have 3 officers just recent last week didn't know that they were being watched on their dash cams, and they were talking to each other. We're going to start this civil war. We're going out and we're going to kill niggas. We're going to dress up like bang bang bangers and keep this stuff going. We're going to get this civil war. And the other officer saying, yeah, we're going to make it happen. Well, all 3 of them were fired yesterday, and their chief police is black. But that just goes to show you that the racism is still alive and well today. You understand? We're not being hung by ropes, but we're being shot in the back. So we have to redirect this preconditioned belief by allowing officers through this urban psychotherapy law enforcement training to see through black eyes. See, I teach about the hood mentality and the urban identity theory. And if officers can understand why they sell drugs, why they gang bang, then maybe their approach will be, less aggressive.
So there's a lot to unpack there. So I haven't heard that story about those officers, and I'm ashamed that they were. I'm going to look it up and see what I can find on it. But so both sides have very strong views. A lot of people talk about police reform, and they cite various statistics, while ignoring others. But I find it interesting, right? Like, well, let me go to this question first, right? There's a lot of mass assumptions on both sides, and you brought up something, right? You had a very strong stance on. It sounds like police use of deadly force, and the other side has this belief where no one wants to be held accountable for anything, where we use deadly force to protect ourselves and protect others, and we have this belief that maybe people want to take that away from us. And if that happens, there won't be any more law enforcement. There are some people that have, some governments that have kind of voted to abolish the police, or in other places defunding the police. Some people believe they can run their communities all alone without law enforcement. Is that your opinion on the matter too? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I am not for not having any type of police security in my community. The presence has to be there. Number one, let's talk about and clear this thing about defunding, because a lot of people in America think that defunding means take away police salary. I am not for that. Police officers have to eat. But the thing is that the city creates a salary, but then they also create funding for different organizations for the police force to use that funding to interact with the community, or to have grassroots programs come into the academy and teach officers certain things, and to develop that interrelational community person relationship that they should have, so that the officer will not get out of his car. The first thing he do is pulls his gun on 4 black boys, say, "Where y'all going? What y'all doing? What you mean? This is our neighborhood." But if that officer walked around the neighborhood, he would be able to, hey, Mike, hey, Joe, hey, Bobby, hey, how's it going? You guys all right? Yes, sir. We don't have that. You know what I mean? And it's because of the views that police officers have of blacks and blacks have of police and so forth. And until we break those barriers down, and until the black community says, okay, officers, if you come, I won't run, but don't come at me with your guns out. You see what I'm saying? It works both ways. There has to be a medium point where officers and the black community, let's be specific, the black community can sit down and they can listen. It's going to be ugly. You guys this and you guys that and you guys this and you guys that. And then what happens? Natural behavior. You become defensive about your behavior, about what you've done, about your actions. So we have to develop a sense of empathy. And that's only going to happen, in my opinion, through psychological training. Because if you do not change the way that you think, then your behavior will be the same.
Yeah, let me jump in here, Tutt. I love what you're saying, and again, this is why I wanted to bring him out too. It was fortunate timing that when Doug introduced me to him last week, we had a training at the academy the following week, and so I was super delighted that he wanted to come out there. And sadly, we didn't have time built in because the schedule was already done. But going forward, we actually want to create a block of time for him to come out and instruct because of a lot of what you're hearing right now, and a couple of things that you said. I think what's interesting right now is that more than ever, police are willing to acknowledge that there's a problem, but I don't think that that's enough. And the other thing that I'm afraid of is that people who have, we're all humans are creatures of habit, right? And so if we've been doing something a certain way for so long, even if you teach us something new, essentially you're going to have to really, you're going to have to fully believe in this new concept, this new way. And while we've seen it happen, we've seen it done, to roll that out like nationally is a huge undertaking, but there's no excuse to not at least try. And my other thing is, while I've gone on record and said, hey, I think defunding the police is a great idea, with the caveat that you're actually going to follow through and build up social services in the community. But the other side of that is as I've read more, and I'm all about learning and having these conversations. But I saw something the other day that says, I think we actually need to increase the budget for law enforcement, but hear me out, not for more military style weapons, not for more tactical vehicles, not to further the divide between police and community. The reason I think we need to increase budgets within law enforcement is because we should actually increase the quality of people that we're getting in this profession. I think there should be a higher standard. I think that there should be some type of, it's such an interesting paradox that, we have a country where most jobs in this country are solely based on your qualifications. Yet the job where you can travel overseas and fight in combat and then deploy into the streets in our communities with weapons and take the life of somebody and their civil liberties, you have to have zero college education. And I think that that's an issue. And I think it's just one issue of many. Again, I think training academies need to be revamped. I think we have to inform the reform, not just reform based on emotion. I think it really does have to be informed. And I think, it's like, yeah, maybe we do limit the size of officers we have in the agencies, but the quality of people that we have in there are phenomenal. Because I'm with you, Tutt. I think that there are, no doubt, I know for a fact, there are some officers that have no business wearing a badge, no business carrying a gun, no business being out on the street. They're just, but also I know that what I'm frustrated by, and I know everyone will hear this a certain way, but it's like the moment people say I support police, it's like you immediately shut off the other side. And it's like, well, hold on a second. I support police, and also I despise everyone that takes advantage of this profession and treats people poorly and like has malicious intentions, because I've become so frustrated by like the nuanced details. No one wants to actually zoom out and look at the problem as you're identifying, which is like, let's look at the history. Let's educate ourselves. Let's look at a better way forward. It seems like we've just become this country that's like, nah, I'd rather just stay angry. Like, I don't really want to have this conversation. I don't really want to put the effort forth to like meet people and learn from them. I would rather just stay mad. But I also know that that's not reality. That's social media and media consumption and everything else. And so we have to be very careful about where we're getting our information. And I think what's powerful that I'm hoping to demonstrate through this is that I just met this man last week. He's opened my mind. He's opened my heart to where I was like, yes, come talk to these cadets. He got to sit in on the class and watch some of the things that we're learning as police officers. I'm sure it opened your eyes a little bit, Tutt, to realize like, oh man, you guys are getting this type of education. And then for them too, to see what your perspective was. And that's what we have to do going forward, is we have to be willing to, and I tell them, if your 5 friends look like you, talk like you, think like you, you're a problem. Like, you have to be willing to expand your horizon a bit and go out and make friends with people that don't look like you, think like you, and talk like you, because that's where we really do learn. So anyway, I just needed to throw all that out there.
That was absolutely perfect timing for that too as well. I appreciate that, Joe. And I appreciate the things you're saying about me. And you're absolutely right. I was surprised, about the psychology that you guys are being taught at the academy, which is on point. But we just got to get that urban piece off in there so that when they roll up, They're able to identify certain things and see certain things and say, hey, do you know why your pants are sagging? Well, let me help you understand that situation. Hey, I understand why you sell drugs, because of this. And it will be a two-party educational piece, if you will, because, the officers are the first line of contact when someone is arrested. Go right ahead.
No, I'm agreeing with you, and I'm excited because, again, this is like where I'm starting to be like, yes, because I was just telling Jesse, it's fascinating that, well, two things. One, the first is, yes, I'm glad you are aware that we're getting this type of training here in San Antonio, but so many, I would say most agencies do not. And that's a big problem. Again, we have to look at the problem outside of it from our own point of view, because there's a bigger issue happening outside of what's affecting you, and people forget that. But the second thing is, we teach here survival Spanish because a big portion of our community only speaks Spanish. And so it's like, hey, it's important if you're going to go work the West Side or the South Side that you understand how to speak at least a little bit of survival Spanish. But why are we not teaching people how to go integrate into the Black communities here in San Antonio on the East Side? Or wherever city, whatever county you're in, our city is broken up in a certain way that we have a strong Black influence on the East Side, and then we have a strong Hispanic Mexican influence on the South and West sides, and then North is all just scattered throughout. But our East Side, we have a dense population of Black people. Why are we not teaching cops how to go work those areas? And then I had this epiphany after meeting with you last week, Tutt. And we talked about this, and I said, it's fascinating to me that we put no effort into deciding who's going to go work where. And the problem I have with this is that you get your most motivated gung-ho officer that's like your poster child for policing. And it's like, I want to go work where the action is. Well, what does that actually mean? What he's saying is, I want to go work in these marginalized communities. I want to go where the crime is. And that's not what we need. That's just going to create sparks. We need to actually vet the officers that we're putting into these marginalized areas, these oppressed neighborhoods, people that have life experience, people that have lived experience, people that have education, people that we know have empathy, and they can go into these communities and say, yes, I want to help you because I see you as a person. I don't just see you as a criminal or as a dealer or as an addict. I actually see the human in you, and I can empathize with you, and I want to help you through that. If you're just the cop that wants to go out there and cuff them and stuff them and go where the crime and the action is, that's probably not the cop that we want in those areas. And so I think, again, I love what he's doing. I love the content that he has. And I'm really, really excited about getting this rolled out to the officers, but I want to see it go much, much bigger than just here though. So we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I really would like to see that happen. It's not going to happen overnight, and you can't expect someone to, what we call in psychology, you have to change your belief window. Because if you do not change what's in your belief window, then your behavior will become an NBC, a negative behavior cycle, meaning that you'll wake up in the morning, you'll put your badge on, you'll put your holster on, you'll put your gun on with the intent of, and then we'll leave that just right there.
Awesome. So this is coming up for me, so I just got to bring it up, right? Because I know that we have a wide spectrum of viewers, right? So I just want to say that some of the things that you are saying, William, are going to be radical to law enforcement and might even get them fired up, right? Because they have their perspective of ours. So I do want to say that these are your perspectives, right? And this is how conversation happens. We listen to you, you listen to us, and we try to find commonalities, right? But I know that it's going to be difficult for people to take this conversation on because they're so set in what they believe and what they know, and we all have different paradigms.
Right. See, and Mr. Jesse, I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to interject what you're saying. And I know it'll appear to be like an attack on the police department or law enforcement throughout this country, whatnot, but no. And you're saying it's my perspective, but no, this is actual scientific proof. Everything that I'm talking about, it's in my manuscript, it's in my book. I can put it up on the screen and actually show you the science behind it. And, the numbers don't lie. And we know that, when you're teaching someone, they want to see the science, the information, and the numbers. And like you said, it's hard for officers to say, no, I'm not that way. But then when we put your behavior And remember that negative behavior cycle I showed you, Joe? When we put your behavior in there, it's going to be what you said, what you did, how you thought, and then your actions. Then you put another behavior in there, what you thought, what you said, and your actions. And then you'll see that even though you think you may not be racist, but these preconditioned behaviors that you have, you're just acting them out, and we think that it is okay.
You also said something interesting, right? You said that we're like the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system, like we're the entry point, right? And something I've also seen, a lot of the disparities that we see with racial disparities are on pretty much the entire criminal justice process. Why is it that police are kind of viewed the most when the entire justice process is made up decision makers, and there's a lot of disparities on those two? How do we address those? And why do you think that police are the main focus when decision-making processes that affect minorities' lives are greatly impacted way further down the line also?
Jesse, thank you so much for bringing that up, brother. Yeah. Just got off the conversation with Senator Royce West just a few minutes ago, and we're talking about that, right? About how are law enforcement the only ones that are targeted at this point, and they shouldn't be. Now, let me explain to you why. Congressman, senator, invest in a plantation known as a prison, right? How do you keep those prisons filled? I have to create unbalanced laws. Small piece of crack cocaine, 50 years. 10 kilos, 5 years probation, right? That's a disparity and an unbalance, and she's supposed to be blind, but she's not. So it starts from up there, right? Then it comes down to the governors, lieutenant governors, then the mayors of the city, to the chief of police, right? On who you're going to target, where you're going to go, and then I'm going to have what's called a quota that you have to meet. So I get it. The pressure is on law enforcement. You see what I'm saying? Coming from, the night watch captains to the sergeants, lieutenants, and on. But they don't understand their positioning either in this hierarchy. They're just doing what like a soldier does, follow orders. So it has to come from higher up the change as far as the imbalance of the laws. Then the law enforcers, which is the law enforcement, PDs, can do a better job in the urban and impoverished communities. So you're right, it's not 100% to blame on the officers. Their actions are caused by a greater demand.
Yeah, because some of the things you mentioned are related to, because you have a lot to unpack there, and I do acknowledge that there's science there. But what I was referring to earlier, it's hard to say, like, I know the people that I serve with and other people that serve, and I don't believe any of them want to go shoot people in the back, right? So that was what I was referring to. But what I think is also interesting is there's all kind. You mentioned the crack disparity, right? That has been shown throughout criminal justice science to be affecting blacks negatively more than anything, right? We ended up with a bunch of people in prison, and I could tell by your life, you went through life in some of the hardest times, in a very rough way during all of that. So I have to wonder is if people realize that we'd have to change laws, we'd have to change, court precedent to kind of get the fundamental changes that communities are asking for. And is that possible? Do you think that'll happen? Can it happen?
At this present time, just like I said, I was just on a conference call with a few state representatives, a senator, and a few other distinguished judges and whatnot, talking about legislation and how to make an impact in legislation. So once we start presenting bills and things to be changed in legislation, say, for instance, in 2020, you're not going to see it in effect until 2023, maybe even 2024, if you will. It's going to take that long, But we have to understand that if the people that make the laws do not see a disparity, that's where it starts. We can protest all we want, talk about bad police, good police, talk about good rioters, looters, that division and things of that nature. But if the laws do not change from up there, people that are down here, that like they're calling for a civil war now, we have to be very, very careful about what we say and, you know, the groups that we step into this social media. Because just like with those officers saying that, you made a statement a while ago about, I don't think that officer gets up with the intentions of shooting nobody in the back. No, nobody does. But then every time that this has happened, right, in my research, you have to listen to what they say. Oh, man, good shot. Oh, you got him in the head. Oh, did you see his blood pop? See? So when you hear things like that after this, as a psychologist, you have to wonder what were your intentions that morning for you to make statements like that. Because just like the female that shot the guy on the highway, she actually said, oh my God, it was a mistake. My gun went off. Well, that should have been involuntary manslaughter. But because of qualified immunity, she was not even charged, and she's gone away free, and a life is lost. And America keeps on going. But let one black cop shoot a white boy in Beverly Hills. Man, are you kidding me? What do you think would happen? Just food for thought, not to answer.
No, so I don't have an answer for that, right? We recognize, you know, that how can there not be racist cops? How can there not be? Of course there is. We also know that there's implicit biases and they affect decision making. We acknowledge all those things. Something that I wanted to bring up also.
Let me interject right here. Now, when you say racist cops, I want everybody to listen and understand. We're not just talking about white, okay? Let's get that understood, because you got Chinese, Hispanic, and blacks acting out this preconditioned behavior. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. Where was I going to go with this? So there's a lot of disadvantage in virtually abandoned communities, right? Oh, I know what I was going to say. So you said something earlier, right? Making police understand why you said they wear their pants this way, why they're doing this behavior, why they act the way they act. So what I have told people when I was teaching classes, I would say that I've never met a racist officer except once, and that's a story for another time. And it wasn't here where I live or where I work or anywhere. It was in the East Coast, actually. But I told them that I feel that we have this belief in good or bad, right or wrong. Like we're idealistic. We want to enforce the laws. We know what the laws are that make us memorize them, and we enforce them to a T. And what I think we may be, for lack of a better word, is, and maybe you have a better word for me now, is we're culturalists. I guess we look at people very harshly. Like, you know, we don't like the way you're representing yourself. We don't like the actions you're choosing. We don't like the raising your kids. We don't like the way you talk, the way you wear your pants, right? And we have those, and I'd like to think that we do pretty well about separating ourselves from decision making. Perhaps we don't, but you mentioned that if we could train officers to recognize these things or understanding things, and maybe be more open to understanding, is that what your teaching does? Is that what your practice does?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. You're right on point with that. Yes, it does. See, if an officer rolls up and he sees an individual with his pants sagging and he's wearing all red, I say, what do you see right there? Oh, he's a gangbanger. He probably represents the Bloods and this and this and this, this and this and this, right? Preconditioned beliefs, preset scenarios, right? Now, if I sit there and I'm in a suit and tie at a bus stop and you got the same guy in the same red clothes, I'm the one causing the problems. Someone calls the police roll up. Who do they go to first? The guy that fits the bill, right? The guy that fits the urban identity theory. But if we can roll and teach officers that, okay, that's not a gangbanger, that's someone suffering from environmental dictation, meaning that your environment dictates 95% of the decisions that you make. How you walk, how you talk. What's up, cuz? What's up, blood? Hello, sir, how are you? It dictates that. So if an officer understands that, maybe he can roll up and already de-escalate the situation. Hey guys, what's going on here? Can I help anybody out? What's the situation? What's happening? Son, pull your pants up. Do you know what that represents? Well, this is what it represents. You know, instead of get your ass over here, gangbanging ass, always got your pants sagging down low. See? So if they can understand why I sell drugs, why I gangbang, then their approach will be less aggressive, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I really do. And I think this is why it was so important for me. And again, I'll be honest, I know I have blind spots, to be sure. And when I've had these conversations over the last several months, it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, yeah, I'm not a racist, and my actions speak for themselves. And in my 15 years of doing this job, in my 11 years on mental health, I've helped Black, white, Chinese, Hispanic, and I've treated everybody fairly. In fact, I haven't used force on anyone except for one white guy one time because he told me he wanted to fight me. Different story. But so it's easy for me to say, well, my actions support the fact that I'm not a racist, but that doesn't just let me off the hook and say, well, then I've got it all figured out either, because in my conversation with you, I learned so much. Because you're absolutely right. I'll be the first to admit, if I got a call to a bus stop and saw those two individuals, I would immediately think he's the problem. The one that's got his pants sag with his bandana and this and that. And it's because based on our training and experience of what we've been fed, based on the months of training we go through, of the content we've consumed, on the videos we've watched, on all these things, it's it's easy to assume that that's what the problem looks like, but it's super unfair. And then that's where profiling comes in, and all these stereotypes and the preconditioned beliefs and everything that you're talking about. And so I think that's why it's super important that we provide training across this country for exactly what you're talking about. Because in every community, there's usually an oppressed area or marginalized area or a Black area of that town. And I'll tell you, in my years of doing this, we've received implicit bias training. We've received training on gay and trans community. We've received training on all this stuff, but it's just like a person comes in, talks to you, shows you a couple of videos, and you sign the box and you leave. There's really no behavioral change. And I think that when we're talking about developing training, it's super important that we think about what that looks like and how we roll it out. And so that's why I'm excited to know you, partner with you. And I'm going to just real quick, Tutt, before we jump back on with you, I want to just show this one thing that I'm super excited about. And Jesse and I are very, very excited that we just partnered with Milo Range, and they came to us and said, hey, will you guys be interested in working with us? And everyone knows simulator-based training. It started with this whole shoot, don't shoot. They have evolved so far beyond shoot, don't shoot. And we're actually creating training. We're creating de-escalation training. We're creating training for them. We're going to write some training for them, not just on de-escalation, but also I'm, again, talking with Tutt, I'm thinking man, there's got to be something here that we can look at doing, for something like this simulator-based training, where again, you don't have to rely on so many people. You'd record the stuff, and then you've got all these different outcomes that we can control through the software and just rely on technology. So that there's huge opportunity there. Again, stuff that we want to definitely talk to you about and work with you on. And again, I'm excited about the direction, because what we know is that yes, we are in a position of identifying there is a problem and we can no longer go on the way we've been going on. But I have heard so little solution-based talks as of late. It's so much of just highlighting the problem and let's just talk about the problem. And it's well, so what's the solution? And people become hopeless because no one's really talking about a way forward. We're just talking about how bad things are. And so I've always been an optimist. I've tried to be an optimist and say, yeah, but there's got to be a better way. And let's go find out what that is. And so excited to partner with Milo, excited to know Tutt for this reason. I think the timing is obviously serendipitous. And so I'm just excited about all of that. But just give me your thoughts on that, Tutt. What do you think about scenario-based training building in the curriculum you're talking about to have officers interact that way?
No, it's very, very important. I had an experience with ex-officer Troy. You know Troy. He had something to do with the simulation training and stuff like that a few years back. So this right here will affect what's called immediate response reaction. You understand what I'm saying? Boom! That's an immediate response reaction, involuntary. But just like a boxer, you can train your mind and your body to respond on an unconscious level. So after the fight, the boxer gets interviewed. He goes, yeah, I threw the right, I threw the left, and I hit him with the uppercut. That's called replaying an action, right? You're recalling what happened because you are not thinking at that moment. It is just a response. It is the exact same way with the officer. If you are trained to respond using non-deadly force, even though your mind with the precondition is saying that is a threat, he looks like a threat, right? So I'm very, very thumbs up to the simulation, because the immediate active response is very, very important. It's very important, along with the teaching.
So something you mentioned earlier, your teaching kind of goes both sides, and some of the predictors of law enforcement violence have been and you mentioned earlier, like it's a psychological response to run or to have a furtive movement or get away. Um, a lot of research is surrounding predictors as non-compliance. Does your training cover the community also how to interact with the police?
Yes, sir, it sure does. As a matter of fact, I even have a portion in the program that talks about mental de-escalation. Now, what does that mean? I've shared this scenario with Joe. It means that, how you always had, okay, subject is apprehended. He's still coming in. He gets out the car, he runs, and always give that guy the kick in the face or the punch, the last one, because they do not know how to mentally de-escalate the adrenaline and the noradrenaline that's in their system. So yes, my program teaches both sides how to interact with one another. I have to teach individuals over here, all police are not bad. And because NWA came out with this song back in the 80s, the police, this is a recorded message in everybody's mind. You understand what I'm saying? Man, forget the police. Why? That's the question that I pose to people. I say, why? Well, okay, well, let's take that off the board. Now, why? Has anyone done anything directly to you? Then you're having what's called an emotional response.
Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to follow up on that with something else that you share with me that I would love for you to share right now. And you talk about just give the scenario that you gave up of like a baby or a 6-month-old coming up in that environment with the music and what's going on in the home and just how that kind of conditions them. Because again, for a lot of officers, it's like, oh, I never thought about that. And for me, I'm like, what the hell? What do you mean you never thought about that? But it's a sad reality. And so share that kind of like linear story that you gave me about just coming up in the hood.
Okay. What he's referring to is part of my research. I've come up with this theory called verbal subliminal suggestions and visual subliminal suggestions. So you have individuals, you have a 30-year-old dad, 2-year-old in the back seat, and he's listening to F the police, or suck this, suck that, or kill that nigga when you see him. You are presetting a belief system in that child's mind by listening to those words, right? You see the little girls that shake their little stuff because the music says to do so, but they're responding to a verbal subliminal suggestion, right? And if officers can understand why we behave the way we behave, or why you see African Americans talk like this and talk with their hands and do like this, then you'll be able to associate with us better, communicate with us better. Because if it's all it takes is one Caucasian male to be riding in with his son, who's 5 years old, Caucasian, and he goes, "Look at those people over there, Dad." And it could go two ways. He could say, "Yeah, those people over there, they just don't want nothing in life. Niggers are always going to be that way." So he has set that child's mind in one direction for the rest of his life, possibly, right? Or he could say, "Yes, son, those individuals are affected by environmental dictation. And because of systemic racism, they're forced into the drug life or into prostitution because, the system has them at a cognitive economical disadvantage." Then you'll be like, oh, so that means that they're still human. Yes, they're still human. Now you see how that one scenario went? Then you have in the hood, you have the 2-year-old boy and the 5-year-old girl sitting there, and the girl's on the phone. "Girl, I can't wait to get my food stamps so I can get my nails done, my hair, and go out." So the baby has just absorbed on how to misuse governmental finances or how to cheat the government. And then it becomes a part of your socialization and your behavior. The dad tells the son, "Go get me a beer, boy." He goes, brings in the beer, and he goes, "Oh, okay, so this is how you quench your thirst when you're thirsty." And goes back to playing. We as parents do not realize through PBT, parental behavior transference, the things that we transfer to our children that sets up their belief system, and that is a stimuli to the preconditioned beliefs that we already have within us.
Those are all really good constructs. I've never heard anyone bring them up that way because they're true and we see them, and you bring up a lot of problematic issues and they're socialized into this life and it's a continuous cycle. And for officers, we're consistently seeing the negative side of these lifestyles, I think, and it gives us just a bad taste in the mouth and we have a negative perception of everything. So I like it. You said that. And I like how I like anything social science where there's constructs, like you actually have a name for something, it's measurable, like, oh, that's really, really cool stuff you're saying right now. But you mentioned a lot of things, and this is where we're at now, right? And you have like a global picture of the problems in these disadvantaged and virtually abandoned communities, in these cycles with vast social issues. What's the biggest thing we should address first? Like, if there was something that you could start working on right now in these communities, because I mean, everyone talks about the problems. There's drugs, there's the school systems. You mentioned being reliant on government assistance, lack of fathers. Like, what do you think is the biggest one?
There is no biggest one. It's almost like a pot of gumbo. When you reach in there, you pull out the corn, it's good. You reach in there, you pull out a crab, it's good. You reach in there, you get a potato, it's good. It's the same way. You reach in there, you pull out environmental dictation, it's bad. You reach in there, you pull out the drugs, it's bad. You reach in there, look at the education system, it's bad. So in that pot of gumbo, at this time, right now, it's law enforcement and community, right? And the disparity of all the other, what I have coined is called NEI, negative environmental influences. When you step outside your house every day, what do you see? That's influencing you. That's influencing your thought, influencing your behavior, influencing your dress. So if we do not be able to, as law enforcement, say, I understand why you gangbang. I understand why you sell drugs. Let me help you get out of this negative behavior cycle. But officers say, hey, wait a minute. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a sociologist. I wear a badge and I'm supposed to uphold the law, right? But we have to change that attitude and that mentality, because law enforcement will get out their car and walk around in Alamo Heights and in Windcrest and say, hello, John, how are you? But when they roll over in the black neighborhood, they're going to hit the sign, pull somebody over. And until we address those conditioning behaviors, then police and black community will not be able to come together and coincide. And it's going to have to be, officers are going to have to roll up and get out of their car and walk and go talk to somebody. You know what I mean? I'm not saying put your life in danger. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying walk up to a crack house and knock on the door and start preaching. There's a protocol and there's a way to approach an individual. And you guys know that. And that's what my training is all about.
Yeah, I think we can pull and dissect and kind of put things together and try to make a more holistic thing, because the reality is we're always going to need tactics and we're always going to have to have force options, but there's a lot to learn about each other that I think is going to help a lot in what you're saying. And like I said, social science is a really important thing to me, and you do have constructs that actually support your theories, so that's excellent. Every time we close a show, we close it the same way. We want to ask you if there's anything you want to leave people with, right? If something's coming up for you, if you feel something, if you want anyone listening to know anything, now's the time to say it. You got anything, parting words of wisdom for us?
I would just like to say, if you guys would like to go to my website, it's www.griprogram.net. So it's GRIPROGRAM.net, and donate, because if there isn't any funding, for this training, then I'm gonna have to do it on my own, because I'm not just here for the money. I know that systemic change has to take place, and it has to start here. So go to my website, visit, donate to help and support this cause, because it's going to happen with or without you, but I would rather it happen with you. And one other final thing, for all Caucasians that are out there, just have a conversation with your loved ones and with your children about Blacks, how you feel about Blacks. What do you think about Blacks? Because many of you don't have the conversations. We're judged by what you see on TV and by what you've seen on cop shows. And that's not who we are. We're suffering from a lot of mental disorders that we ourselves are not even aware of. So please learn us so that we can help each other. Thank you.
No, that's really good. There's a lot of disproportionality and disparity with mental health diagnoses and with access to care. Like, we see all that, right? Funding, all of that. So that's important. These conversations are tough. and they're going to be for everyone involved. Some things are difficult to swallow, and there's history there, and we may not feel like there's a connection between all the things, but we just heard that there is. And more importantly, right, I have been one to say this. There's a lot of facts and statistics out there that'll say one thing, but what really matters is how we are perceived above anything else. And it's obvious right now that we aren't liked because people have seen us do things that are wrong. And that's what we're dealing with right now. And I know for the good amongst us, it's really hard right now. I hear a lot of people saying stuff like, now's the time to retire, or I just got to get through this and leave. And we know that society needs structure, society needs laws, and they need you, but they need you at your best. And I would like you to look back on why you decided to do this job. If you're a first responder, what made you do it? Why you came on? All of those ideas about making the world a better place. And you may feel that we're highly misunderstood, but what are we doing about that? Right? Are we sitting back and getting mad and just saying, you know what? They're wrong. Conversations need to happen. And you know what? If they don't want to listen, okay. But at least we're trying. So I just ask people to remain hopeful. These conversations need to happen. I like the fact that William wants to talk, wanted to join us, and was very candid about what he knows, about what he's seen, and was very open about his life. He's got a powerful story. And I just hope that these conversations won't be so insightful, but be more eye-opening and bringing towards the center and having people want to engage in them instead of being inflammatory. Joe, what do you got?
Yeah, no, again, Tutt, appreciate you, man. I saw Elizabeth say, well, many things, but one, I love food analogies, true. But so you got me with Gumbo, but she's wanting a part 2 next week. And so we'll see. I mean, I think, again, this is something that needs to happen. And I think, so I appreciate you being willing to do this. I know you're working right now. He was just flashing his guns before he came live as a personal trainer that he is. But I wanted to wrap with one thing. So I teach this class, and again, this is something that came around in the 3-4 decades ago. Dr. Anda and Folletti created this called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And when I show this, I just taught it last week at the Academy as well. But what I want you to pay attention to is the root system. And if you look at a marginalized, oppressed, oftentimes Black community, forgotten community, left behind community, you're going to see a lot of things like poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, economic mobility, social capital, poor housing quality, and violence. That's the root system. So why would we ever expect that we're going to be able to plant some beautiful tree in this type of environment? And it's important for cops to understand this if they're working in these neighborhoods, because if you're a cop and you look at the tree here, which is domestic violence, substance abuse, emotional, sexual abuse, maternal depression, physical, emotional neglect, divorce, mental illness, incarceration, that's a great place to work if you are that go-getter cop and you have that mindset of like, I want to go out there and enforce the law. But I would ask for you to just take a listen back on what Tutt was talking about, what we've discussed here today. Sorry, I wanted to take that away. Go back and listen to what we were talking about today. As a police officer, if you're working in these communities, you shouldn't have to ask yourself, why is the problem? Or you shouldn't be complaining about why the problem is the problem. And you shouldn't want to work those areas because it's easy fruit on that tree. You should want to work those areas because there's the opportunity for the greatest change to be made. And that's my hope for people, is that if you're working in these areas, don't just go there because you think there's action. Go there because you see opportunity. And I would please ask that anyone that watched this, that hears this, share this. This is a message that needs to get out. This is a white cop, a Mexican cop, and a Black guy in the community coming together saying we have hope. And it's not either one's fault. It's my fault. And it's everyone's individual responsibility to do their own individual part to say, I'm 100% responsible for my 50% in this, whether I'm an officer or I'm a community member or I'm a politician or I'm in government, I'm 100% responsible for my 50%. And the other 50% is the other person, the community member, the officer, whatever it is. We can come together. We just have to make that choice. I appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, Tutt left me. There he is. I appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you coming in, Tutt. Again, this has been this has been a super important one for me personally. So thanks again for your time on this Saturday.
Appreciate you, Jesse. And thanks everybody for your comments. I really appreciate you guys. And there is going to be a part 2.
Oh yeah. GRIprogram.net. Go to the website, check the man out, follow him, and then we'll talk about doing another one of these because I think it's going to be great. So take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Take care.
Okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow.